It Chapter 1 is one of my favorite movies. Now, 2017 already had a ton of heavy-hitting blockbusters like Baby Driver and Captain Underpants. However, it really struck me. Not only was it a great scary movie during my first watch that lost me an entire night of sleep, but it was also a legitimately really funny and memorable film all the way through. So when the movie came to a close and the title appeared again, this time teasing the sequel where all the characters would be adults, I could only imagine how exactly they would execute that. Because in the 1990 version of it, the adult and kids sections of the story were developed simultaneously, using flashbacks to transition between the two. But a big change in It Chapter 1 was that there were no flashbacks or adult segments. Rather, all the child segments were just compiled into one focused story. So eventually, I started to get a little worried for the upcoming Chapter 2, which to me seemed to have all the odds stacked against it. Not only did it have to live up to the quality and reception of the first movie, but more importantly, most people agree that the parts with the characters as adults is actually the weaker half of the story. So I figured the crew would have to pull some serious magic in order to make this movie work. And did they succeed? What do you think? It Chapter 2 is a very confusing movie. At a glance, it looks and feels just like the first film. However, much like a man with a painted-on smile, upon looking closer, something seems a little off. Now, of course, the first movie isn't perfect either, but here, the problems are just incredibly glaring. And before you ask, yes, I have read the book. It was over 1,000 pages long, but I did it. And don't worry, while I will be referencing the book during this review, I will not be faulting the movie just for being different, as they are completely separate versions of the story and should be treated as such. So you know what? I say, what the hell? I've got my bowl of candy here, my jack-o'-lantern over there. There's something that I hopefully don't need to worry about, and I've got the movie queued up on the TV. So let's just see for ourselves what the sequel has to offer. The movie starts with a short continuation of Chapter 1, followed by Mike doing some classic narration. The sign of any great film.
God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you. It's flaccid, sloppy writing.
And then we transition into the opening scene where we meet our not main characters, Adrian Mellon and Dawn Haggerty, who are stopped by a group of homophobes that beat them up and throw Adrian off the bridge, where he is then finished off by Pennywise and... Okay, I'm not the only one who saw that. That blood totally just spawned in there. Whatever. After that, it cuts back to Mike sleeping in his study, where he is then suddenly awakened by a police transmission from his radio, thus prompting him to investigate the scene where a special message from Pennywise is waiting for him. Alright, now let's just dissect all that, shall we? I guess the most obvious thing to bring up is... this scene is completely useless. First of all, let's think back to the opening of Chapter 1. What do we learn in that scene? We meet Bill, the main character. We get well acquainted with Pennywise, the main antagonist. Bill's brother Georgie is murdered by Pennywise, which sets up Bill's arc in the film. And we get a pretty good look at just what kind of movie this is going to be tone-wise. Now, here's what happens in this scene. We meet Adrian and Dawn, or rather, we meet Adrian because Dawn's name isn't mentioned once. Then Pennywise kills Adrian without a word in less than 1 minute of screen time. And already, you should be noticing a problem here. First of all, Dawn doesn't appear again in the film. So Pennywise killing Adrian right in front of him isn't even setting up some kind of character arc. It is just a really random death that has no bearing on anything. Now, Adrian does appear later in the film, although barely. He makes a short cameo later, and Mike says his name once.
A man, Adrian Mellon, slaughtered.
Mike,
a girl,
shit.
Lisa Albrecht, was the other night went missing. There have already been others, and there will be more.
But in case you didn't notice, Mike also mentions another victim that we've never met, which honestly just kind of highlights how little impact Adrian's death really had on the story. Literally anyone could have died here, and Mike would have reacted the same way, just so long as he found evidence that it was Pennywise who was responsible. And speaking of Pennywise, God, is this a crap introduction. Remember how the first movie spent a good deal of time establishing Pennywise's personality during the drain scene? What made that scene work was that a good chunk of it was spent on its conversation with Georgie. She tried to establish Pennywise as just being some regular weirdo dressed as a clown, with the twist being that Pennywise is not human at all and is actually a monster that eats people. But in this scene, they just cut to the scary monster part immediately, and so we lose out on all the tension, suspense, and mystery that emanated from the first movie's opening. You could argue that that section of the suspense isn't necessary necessary since this is the sequel, but it still feels rather rushed and underdeveloped, as this scene tells us practically nothing about the way Pennywise performs and operates. If you were to watch this movie for the first time, with this scene as the basis for how to understand the monster for the rest of the film, then you'd probably think Pennywise is just some savage, opportunistic killer, when that is not the case at all. It is almost unbelievable how much Pennywise got oversimplified for this scene, which already featured characters that we don't need to remember for the rest of the movie, and so the entire thing just feels like a waste of time. I shit you not. You could cut the stuff with Adrian out and still not miss anything important. Actually, let's see what that would look like, shall we?
We are what we wish we could forget. Thing is, sometimes what we wish was forgotten.
Also, does anyone else find it just a touch odd that Adrian, one of the only explicitly gay characters in the movie, is killed off right after he's introduced? You should, because it's actually a common trope. Yes, this scene pissed people off. And no, it doesn't help the movie's case that this scene was in the book, because one, it wasn't in the 1990 version at all, so it absolutely is not essential to the story, and two, when it was put in the movie, it was actually dumbed down from the book. You see, in Chapter 2, after Adrian... Oh, wait, I get it. They chose the drain scene to be the opening in It Chapter 1 because that was the subject of Chapter 1 in the book, and the bridge scene is the opening here because that was the subject of Chapter 2 in the book. Give me a goddamn break. Anyway, after Adrian was killed, Dawn and the assailants were brought in by police to be interrogated about what happened, which gives Dawn the chance to share that the clown he saw, he believes, is actually a representation of Derry itself. So what the book was trying to get across is that Derry is homophobic, Pennywise is the source of Derry's evil, therefore it is saying that homophobia is evil. And that's all fine, but none of that makes it into the movie, because the scene has to be brief, and thus the audience isn't given any way to make that connection. So this part just seems homophobic unironically. I'll say it once, and I'll say it again. They should have just picked a different scene for the opening. Moving on, we cut to Bill as an adult, who's struggling to adapt a book he wrote into a movie, since pretty much everyone on the movie crew agrees that the ending to his book sucked. And no, I will not be keeping a tally every time they use this guy, because it only happens like 5 times. But Bill's bout with creative differences don't last too long as he is quickly interrupted by Mike, who calls him on the phone to tell him what's up. Then without skipping a beat, Mike calls all of the other losers as well. And while it is cool to see everyone grown up and stuff, I have to ask, how the hell did Mike get everyone's phone numbers? There's no way he could have gotten them all before each of them left Derry in the early 90s. Not to mention that this is supposed to be the first time anyone's heard from Mike in 27 years. Meaning that he had to have acquired this information on his own without anyone's knowledge. This is sort of explained in the book, with Mike saying that he had been keeping tabs on everyone since they had left, but it's still not explained how he got everyone's exact phone numbers without even leaving Derry. Though it is slightly more believable in this version since it does take place in modern day. So I'll bet Mike just looked everyone up on Facebook and then stalked out their information, meaning that Mike is officially a doxer. Anyway, because of Mike's calls to action, everyone drops what they were doing and heads to Derry, except Stan, who kills himself instead. But the losers aren't the only ones to be called back to Derry, since in a flashback, it's revealed that Henry Bowers is still alive, and apparently survived falling what looked like a 100-foot drop, potential drowning, and possible illness from stewing in grey water for hours. Seems legit. Looks like Henry has a guardian angel, one so kind in fact that it pays him a visit years later when Henry's an adult living in a mental institution. Again, seems legit. Then Henry is sent to his room, where it's waiting to return his knife to him. Furthermore, there's no blood or dirt or rust or anything on it. Wow, that was very nice of Pennywise to keep the dang thing in such pristine condition for him. Meanwhile, almost every one of the losers finally arrive at Derry for a nice Chinese food dinner. And after seeing so much death, destruction, and violence in the last 30 minutes, by contrast, this is such a magical and uplifting scene. Seeing everyone cracking jokes, insulting each other, laughing at said jokes and insults, and engaging in short banter is almost infectiously joyful and relieving. Like this is the most fun dinner that any of them have ever had.
So wait, Eddie, you got married?
Yo, why is it so fucking funny, dickwad?
What, to like a woman?
Fuck you, bro.
Fuck you!
All right, what about you, trash mouth? You married?
There's no way Richie's married.
No, I got married.
Richie, I don't believe it.
When?
You not hear this?
No.
Oh, you know I got married?
No.
Yeah, no, me and your mom are very, very happy right now. Very happy. He totally fell for it.
Fuck it.
But of course, after catching up, it's time to get down to business. So Mike finally lets everyone know that it has returned.
I remember all of it.
Pennywise.
Oh, the fucking clown.
But like they say, speak of the devil and he shall appear. So right after that, Pennywise jeers the losers about how Stan couldn't make it, and then pranks their fortune cookies hardcore. Oh god, Mike, what do we do? Let's not exit the room. Good plan. Smashing one of the chairs onto the table while shouting like a lunatic is definitely the least suspicious course of action here. By the way, Mike had better be paying for all that stuff he smashed. I won't stand to see him stealing more shit. Also, funnily enough, in the 1990 version when the fortune cookies come to life, the losers actually do run out of the room and don't cause nearly as much of a scene. Point for the 1990 version, I guess. Anyway, after hopefully not getting banned from the place, everyone is gearing to leave until...
Hey, Richie!
How'd you know my name?
The fun's just beginning. Right?
Well, this is awkward. I sure hope Richie realizes that isn't Pennywise. Whoa, no touching, no touching! So the losers finally exit the restaurant, where they attempt to call Stan to make sure he's okay. He's not, while also getting on Mike's case about bringing everyone back.
You lied to us. That's not okay. Yeah, first words out of your mouth should have been like, hey man, you want to come to Derry and get murdered? Because then I would have said no.
Wait, so Mike didn't even mention Pennywise on the call? Wow, what a guy. No wonder everyone tries to abandon him. Everyone except Bill, who Mike begs to stay, pleading that if he can just show him one thing, then he can leave if he still wants to. But before we get to find out what that is, we cut to the bleachers scene. Oh my god! The bleachers scene. This part is going to take a fair bit of analysis. The scene opens on a new character, Vicky, who is bored out of her mind after being dragged to a local baseball game by her mother. That is until a firefly appears before her and leads her under the bleachers where... Pennywise is waiting. The scene so far holds a lot of parallel to the drain scene from Chapter 1, with Vicky being a stand-in for Georgie and the Firefly being a stand-in for the boat. And just like in that scene, the object of interest is caught by Pennywise, who is hiding in the shadows but partially reveals itself to greet the child and gain their trust. And during the first half, the viewer thinks that Vicky will fall for it, just as Georgie did. That is, until the movie actually pulls a bait-and-switch and Vicky actually rejects Pennywise's act.
I guess I must be your friend too.
If you're my friend, why are you hiding in the dark?
And this feels like a huge win for the audience, since everyone who's seen the first movie knows exactly what will happen if Vicky lets her guard down. And so she turns her back on Pennywise.
You're not my friend, you're scary.
But then...
Why are you crying?
Pennywise, the suave son of a bitch, throws Vicky's better judgment right back in her face. Just like how Pennywise completely flipped the cautionary advice of don't trust strangers on its head with Georgie, it completely destroys that same advice by using the wisdom of don't judge people by their appearance, which strikes a chord with Vicky since apparently she gets bullied a lot for the birthmark on her face, thus prompting Pennywise to lure her in with the promise that it can make that mark go away. And once again, like the drain scene, she isn't forced to approach Pennywise, she's goaded to approach it, since like Georgie, it has something she wants and actually frames it as though wanting it is her idea.
You would have to get close enough to see my face. I don't know, Vicky.
No, it's okay. I won't make fun. I promise.
Promise.
Vicky comes forward, trusting that Pennywise will grant her wish, and...
You're supposed to say 3.
She dies. This should have been the opening scene. It has everything. That same level of psychological manipulation, tension, build-up, character, symmetry, playing with expectations. It's exactly what the film needed. If they added a few extra shots for context and a new version of Mike stumbling onto the scene, then it would have been perfect. But, as it stands now, like the actual opening scene, it accomplishes nothing. Vicky is never mentioned again and doesn't have any kind of connection to the main characters. Sure, she appears briefly at the beginning with Adrian, but he isn't important either. And I know I'm ragging on this film a lot for focusing on minor characters, but the first film didn't do this. There was never a point in the first movie where there was an entire scene dedicated to Pennywise just killing some random person. Everyone who died was established to at least be a minor supporting character before their deaths, and anyone anyone who wasn't was killed off screen. But if this scene was the opening, then it wouldn't have been completely meaningless, because it does a great job at re-establishing Pennywise, who is the more important character by far. Nay, even the most important character. Which is why it's such a problem that this scene is shunted until the 40-minute mark. That's right, Pennywise, one of the most expressive horror villains ever, doesn't get to speak until a fourth of the way into its own movie. That is downright criminal. This scene had all the makings to be great, but instead it's just completely wasted. Ugh, I need some candy. Okay, so after all that unfolds, Henry breaks out of the mental ward, the other 4 losers return to their suspiciously understaffed hotel. Seriously, does anyone work here? And we finally get to see what Mike and Bill are up to, which I swear is not suspicious at all. Mike is just trying to harmlessly lead Bill into this crusty apartment above the library that Mike works in, where there are documents scattered all over the place as if Mike is some kind of conspiracy theorist. Also, Mike is so flustered that he actually stutters more than Bill does.
I've read every book. I've talked to every person in this godforsaken town. Everybody that would talk to me anyway, and that's not a long list.
So yeah, no cause for alarm. Mike is just very adamant about showing Bill his epic leather box of questionable origin.
How'd you get it?
I found it. No, they gave it to me. I stole it.
God damn it, Mike. Oh well, add it to the list. And if that wasn't already shady enough, apparently the water he offered to Bill was actually drugged to make him see visions of it. Okay, Mike, I'm not sure how necessary it was to trick him like that. If Bill was willing to go as far as to come with you to the library, he probably would have drank it on his own accord so long as you just told him what it was. Boy, is it not looking good for Mike's credibility. Not that we have time to ponder on that, as Bill starts tripping the hell out and starts seeing visions that teach him about how they're going to beat it. Somehow. Honestly, from these visions alone, I really couldn't tell you what the hell it is the losers would need to do. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Beverly reveals to everyone that if they don't stop it now, then everyone will die from suicide, meaning that each of them have no choice but to stay. So cool, everyone is convinced and no one is going to leave. Now in hindsight, now Mike drugging Bill seems a little pointless narrative-wise, since Bill was there with everyone else when Beverly dropped that they would all die. Sure, Bill vouches for Mike's plan, but everyone was pretty much convinced at that point, and so the scene of the library doesn't really amount to much more than a big exposition dump. Anyway, everybody heads out to the Baron so they can give us more exposition, which transitions into a flashback at the old clubhouse. I'll give you the summary. Ben built the place since he becomes an architect as an adult. Eddie starts acting like an asshole for no reason. Mike expresses how when he grows up he wants to move to Florida, and Stan questions if they'll all still be friends when they're older, of course tying back into his suicide and how he would never see any of his friends again after moving away from Derry. And after everyone is done reminiscing, Mike finally explains what it is they need to do.
The ritual. To perform it requires a sacrifice.
Sacrifice. I nominate Eddie.
Wait, what?
In order to perform the ritual, everyone needs to sacrifice tokens that symbolize important memories from the past, which everyone must split up to find. Well, except Mike, of course, who found his already, and Stan, well, you know. Then there's another flashback. Whoa! Did you see that? Why did the screen just flash red like that? Was that really necessary? Oh, and by the way, yes, there will be a lot more flashbacks after this. Some short, some long, which is very in tune with the 1990 version. The longer form flashbacks are mostly pretty harmless, but the shorter flashes are usually pretty distracting whenever they appear. Like during this part later on when Ben and Henry exchange a look, and then it flashes back to the scene where Henry is cutting up Ben. Like, what? Were they worried that everyone would forget how these two characters knew each other? Going back to the token hunt, this part of the movie is really just one large excuse for the film to add in a bunch of scares and Pennywise appearances. Speaking of which... oh man, does the CGI in this movie, especially in these scenes, look incredibly fake. Now, the first movie was able to get away with having a few CGI monsters by using low lighting and such, but here, a lot of them are shot in really well-lit areas, which really does not do the effects any favors. This movie had more than twice the budget that the first one did, and as such, Chapter 2 just cannot help itself when it comes to showing off how detailed its monsters are. If these scares were executed a bit more subtly, it probably wouldn't have been as noticeable, but as it stands now, Paul Bunyan looks incredibly fake in the chase sequence with him as ridiculous. The old woman is probably the worst offender of how they overdid it with some of these creatures, and even the leper looks more fake, which is impressive because the leper was already the weakest scare from the first movie. Now at first, the tension that the leper gives off is actually quite effective when it's covered in this large sheet, but then the sheet is removed and the illusion is completely ruined because of how over the top the leper is designed and animated, and boy does it just look positively ludicrous. Anyway, like I said, not much really happens in these scenes, so I'll just go over them all quickly. First is Bev, who revisits her childhood home to get Ben's poem from behind a wall. Oh look, CGI bugs. That was necessary. Richie goes to the movie theater's arcade to get his token. Literally. Then when he's in the park, Pennywise appears there to taunt him, saying that it knows his secret. And, Yeah, that's about it. So I guess to paraphrase the nostalgia critic, the clown doesn't really, hurt him or anything. It just sort of shows up and calls him gay. What a jerk. Before Bill starts looking for his token, he buys his old bike Silver off of Stephen King. Also, fun fact, according to one of the special features on the DVD to this movie, King apparently said this while on set.
And he said to Andy, I'm happy to do it, but I want you to know that I'm a jinx. And every time I'm in a movie, it doesn't do well. And Andy said, I think we'll be fine this time around. I think we're gonna change your luck.
Ooh, yeah, that explains a lot. Also, while I have these DVDs, I just thought I'd mention how on the back of the Chapter 1 case, Pennywise is there giving this very menacing grin. Meanwhile, on the back of the second movie's case, Pennywise's expression just says, really? Anyway, after getting his bike back, Bill goes to his old house to retrieve Georgie's boat from the storm drain. But by some happenstance, the kid from the Chinese restaurant is also there. Keep away from the sewers and drains, Bill said. Quietly.
Move! You hear voices from that shore, you stay away from it.
And then after Bill calmly and rationally tells the kid to be careful, he gets back on Silver and...
I only hear voices in the tub.
Bill, no, what are you doing? Bill, no touching!
No touching! No touching! No touching!
Ben goes back to the school, but nothing really happens to him in the present because his token, which we later learn is the yearbook page with Beverly's signature, was in his wallet the entire time. The real meat of this section is the flashback, where Ben is being pursued by Pennywise, who had taken the form of Beverly to hurt Ben emotionally before flaming up and chasing him.
Your hair is with their fire!
Get it? Get it? And lastly, Eddie returns to the old pharmacy to get his inhaler. Then we are treated to another flashback where Eddie is beckoned into the creepy basement that comes standard with every clinic.
That's not good sounds. That's very bad sounds. Oh, I see you over there. I see you. I see you.
Meanwhile, adult Eddie is assaulted by the leper again, but remarkably, he's actually able to fend it back and choke the thing to death, thus showing how truly weak it is as it— Oh my god! No! His mouth was open!
What the fuck?
Okay, that was pretty good. I swear, Eddie has some of the best moments in the entire movie, which is impressive when you consider they have Bill Hader playing Richie.
I did what I had to do.
So having found each of their tokens, everyone returns to the hotel. Bill cheats on his wife a little, and Pennywise breaks up the romance with some classic inanimate object-based intimidation. Meanwhile, Henry sneaks up on Eddie and stabs him in the face, but luckily Eddie pulls out his Uno reverse card and stabs him back.
You should cut that fucking mullet. It's been like 30 years, man.
Man, Eddie's just the best. It'll be very sad when he dies. While Eddie receives medical attention, Bowers escapes and Bill arrives at the fair. But alas, he is too late and Pennywise kills the kid from earlier right in front of him. After that, there's a flashback to Stan's bar mitzvah, which is actually a remaster of a deleted scene from the first movie. And we cut to the library at night and... inside the library, Mike is tending to the place when... Okay, can we talk about the lighting? Let's talk about the lighting, please, man. I am dying to talk about the lighting. When Bowers escaped, Richie drove to the church for the flashback, and Bill made it to the carnival. It was day. No denying that. It seems kinda bright, so I'm assuming the middle of the afternoon. But when Bill exits the funhouse, it is night. For now, let's ignore the implication that the token hunt took place from crack of dawn morning to dead-ass night, which during an average summer day in Maine is roughly a 16-hour time frame, and instead focus on how Bill had to have been in that funhouse for hours just to be leaving it during the night. Sure, maybe Pennywise pulled some shit in there. Maybe. But that doesn't explain Richie. After he visits the church, he goes to the library to save Mike from Henry, who came there to kill him. But as we saw, it was night at the library, yet it was day the last time we saw both Richie and Henry, and furthermore, both of them have cars. How the hell were they both so slow getting to the library? But wait, that's not all, my friends. I tell you, that's not all. When they are in the library, there is sunlight pouring in through the windows. It's night. It's night. Where is all this natural light coming from? And even furthermore again, after dealing with Henry, Mike calls Bill on the phone, who is at the fair at night, while you can see the light pouring through the library windows on Mike's end, meaning that the time of day for Mike and Bill is different when they are in the same town at the same time. So anyway, Henry is left dead in the library, and while it is a little more subtle in this movie compared to the book or the 1990 version, the losers still go out of their way to not report the body. I mean, I get it. They have to deal with Pennywise ASAP, but what about after that? What, is Mike just gonna report it the next day and say that Henry assaulted him in the morning, only for the forensics team to find that the time of death doesn't match? Not to mention all that DNA evidence that Richie left at the scene. There is no conclusion to this thread of the story, so I'll just add it to the list and leave it at that. After the call, everybody heads over to Neibolt so they can fight Pennywise. And they go in equipped with flashlights, even though the place is decently lit from sunlight coming through the windows. And just like the first time they went in there, everybody gets separated. On one end, Ben gets cut up by Pennywise, which I guess is why they included that flashback of Henry doing that. And on the other side, Bill, Richie, and Eddie are greeted by Stan's head, which then turns into a head spider. That attacks them and gets very close to eating Richie's face until Ben steps in and stabs the spider with a knife. And then he does it again like 7 times. Yes. Yeah, hell yeah, kill him. God, that's satisfying. Well, I'd say that deserves a handful. Shit. Crap. Well, I guess I can still continue the review so long as this flashlight has power. Oh boy. So they stab the thing, and it escapes to the well in the basement, much like the first movie, and the losers follow it back to the scene of Chapter 1's climax, only this time without the pile of junk and floating bodies, revealing a hatch in the center.
In the depths is where crypt. In the beneath, if I believe. Is she okay? I think at this point that's a relative question.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Through the hatch, they find Pennywise's true lair, the crash site from when it landed on Earth millions of years ago. This is where they will perform the ritual of Chewed, which requires them to burn each of their tokens in Mike's box. Good thing none of their artifacts got wet while they were swimming in the sewer water. That would have been really awkward if they had come all this way only for Ben's page or Bev's poem to be completely ruined. So the ritual begins and it appears in its true form, the Deadlights. While the losers perform the ritual, they catch it in the box. Mike tries to close it and... shit. Well guys, sorry to burst your balloon, but it didn't work.
Oh, did it work, Mikey? Did it work? Tell them why your silly little ritual didn't work. Tell them it's all just, what's the word, Eds? Gazebo.
Now, isn't this interesting?
So, turns out, Mike, the shady lunatic that he is, actually lied to everyone about the ritual of Chewed, and even scratched out the fourth side of the box so Bill wouldn't see what happened there during his drug trip. Mike, you are literally the worst!
Are you fucking kidding me, Mike? Hurt him! Fuck! Fuck you, Mikey! Fuck!
And what ensues is probably one of the most awesome climaxes of any horror movie ever. The Deadlights rise back out of the box, illuminating the entire cave in a sickening blue light, and Pennywise, in its new hulking form, emerges from the center, claws at the ready, and starving for vengeance. And the only thing that any of the characters were able to think at this point in time are, oh god, we are so screwed! And now you might be thinking, but if the ritual didn't do anything, then why did the fire go out and why did the Deadlights go into the box? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because Pennywise is a massive troll. The whole idea of Pennywise is that it's a monster that feeds on fear, and therefore every one of its appearances are based on surprise, shock, and trickery. However, it doesn't just do this out of necessity, because Pennywise absolutely loves screwing with people. In the book, when Eddie is hospitalized after breaking his arm, Pennywise is there and is described as doing dances, and even a backflip as if to celebrate his injury. And similarly, when Eddie breaks his arm in Chapter 1, Pennywise shows up and takes its sweet goddamn time killing him just to keep him on edge for as long as possible. And then this part absolutely takes the cake in how far Pennywise goes with its tricks.
All that success, all those sit-ups, but deep down still just a little fatty loser who always knew he would die alone.
Oh my god! You can just hear how much it's enjoying this! Anyways, it splits everyone up. Eddie and Richie experience a callback to the door scene, which is absolute gold. Ben and Beth are repelled away from each other with their attraction to each other being what saves their lives. And Bill reaches the conclusion to his arc regarding Georgie's death. And while all that was going on, Mike was just kinda hiding behind these spikes. Oh, so it was that easy, huh?
I know what you are. That's why I'm not afraid.
I know what you are. A madman.
At first, it seems like Mike is pretty much screwed here, but luckily Richie saves his ass again. I swear, Mike had better get Richie a soda after all this.
I threw a rock at him.
And after being thoroughly insulted by Richie, it catches him in the deadlights, leading to probably my favorite shot from the entire film, where the deadlights are seen focusing energy through a hole in Pennywise's head, almost as if Pennywise is some kind of projection or lens, because it isn't the clown, it's the light, a thing that has no form. But not entirely. In the book, on page 1072 and 1073, it says, "Whatever lived out here in the black might be invulnerable when it was here and nowhere else, but it was also on Earth, under Derry, in a form that was physical. However repulsive it might be, in Derry it was physical, and what was physical could be killed." And so with that in mind, Eddie takes his weapon in hand, puts all of his off-screen javelin-throwing expertise to the test, and strikes Pennywise hard enough to make it let go of Richie and reel back from the pain and incidentally impale itself on one of the larger spikes. And thus it would appear that it is slain. Eddie checks back with Richie to see if he's okay, and... wait a minute, what's that in Pennywise's hand? Oh shit! Eddie, no! Oh god, and if that wasn't enough, Pennywise then starts waving him around before tossing him into a cave, livid all the while! Though thankfully, the spike Pennywise is stuck on buys the losers just enough time to get to Eddie and form a plan.
The Shakopiwa. All living things must abide by the laws of the shape they inhabit.
The tunnel! Pennywise has to make him so small to get through the entrance of the cavern, right? Okay, so if we can get back there, we can force him down to size.
Yeah.
We make him small enough so we can kill him.
Alright, here we go. Let's talk about the ending. The way they end up defeating Pennywise is by making it small, not by forcing it through the cave, but by making it feel small. Or in other words, calling it names until it shrivels up, which is an idea that I like in theory, since a major aspect of Pennywise's character is its ego. It is spiteful, resentful, narcissistic, and so sure of its own immense power that by the time the climax began, it legitimately believed that it had already won. So when Eddie managed to skewer it on the cave spike, that was a huge blow to its sense of self. It was merely toying with everyone before, but after Eddie managed to hurt it, Pennywise became so pissed that it just went straight for the kill, because it could not deal with the reality that it isn't as powerful as it would like to believe. The idea of Pennywise being vulnerable to ridicule also applies to when Richie started insulting Pennywise earlier, and instead of coming up with some kind of attack or scare, it just immediately resorted to using the deadlights to shut him up. And so that's how they bring Pennywise down. Just like how it had to retreat in Chapter 1 when it realized the losers weren't afraid of it. Also, another great reason why the bleachers scene should have been the opening.
People always make fun because of the way I look.
So it's a good ending hypothetically, but in execution, it really just makes Pennywise's defeat look way too easy. It's like, oh, that's all we had to do? Huh. Which is not an especially hard impression to get when name-calling is shown to literally repel Pennywise's attacks. Sure, it kinda makes sense if you analyze it like I just did, but to most people who see the movie only one time, they'll just be left confused as to how the hell this worked. You've got people thinking, oh, Eddie getting impaled must have completed the ritual of Chewed, thus making Pennywise susceptible. Or, oh, it's just another trick from Pennywise and it'll come back again somehow. Or, oh, Pennywise is just a big ol' softy who doesn't like being made fun of. What do I think? Well, I don't think the ritual actually did anything. Why would it? It is, after all, just a bunch of random stuff that they burned in a box. Pennywise probably is really dead. Why would it wait so long only to not claim its revenge? And Eddie probably does have something to do with it, since after the losers rip out and crush Pennywise's heart, it's revealed that Eddie had succumbed to his injuries. It's very sad that he died, but I think it's what won them the day. Let's think back to Stan. In a letter he wrote before his death, he said that he knew he couldn't face Pennywise again because he was too scared. So he took himself off the board to prevent everyone from dying. The message is clear. If any of the losers couldn't get over their fears, then they couldn't win. This is why it was important for Eddie to die, because like Stan, he was too afraid. He froze up at the sight of the head spider. He was the only one who didn't jump in after Bev when she was dragged underwater. And he was the last person to enter the deeper lair, and only did so after a pep talk with Richie. Eddie was scared shitless, which unfortunately was something that Pennywise was able to draw power from. So when he died, that power dried up, and the only members left were the ones who weren't scared. And thusly, its fear-based attacks had nothing to sustain them, and with nowhere to escape to this time, Pennywise itself crumbled and died. That's my theory anyway. The defeat itself is still just confusing and anticlimactic when you get right down to it, and no amount of theory crafting is gonna fix that. In other words, I didn't like the ending. Ah, geez, I know where this is going. So after killing Pennywise, its lair begins to fall apart, and the losers are forced to leave Eddie's body behind to escape. And it's morning when they make it out of Nebel, meaning that they were somehow down there for the entire night. Finally, the movie concludes with everyone receiving a letter from Stan containing his suicide note, which transitions into some more classic narration, showing everyone's lives after ridding themselves of it. Bill starts a new book that he's confident will have a good ending, Richie is implied gay for Eddie, Ben and Bev start a new life together, and Mike, after having stayed in Derry his whole life, finally realizes his dream and leaves Maine to go to Florida, thus bringing the story to an end. In conclusion, there is a lot to like about this movie. It still has a lot of the great charm, comedy, and character that the first movie had, but it is just weighed down heavily by its major problems. The opening scene is atrocious and feels incredibly out of place. The CGI looks really bad and fake at times, which really shatters the tone of some scenes. Many instances of flashbacks feel pointless or just lazy, and as such, there are many questionable editing decisions. All of the gay representation can be easily edited out, which is a very bad sign, and the final confrontation with Pennywise ended in an anticlimax that confused everyone. These are all problems that are very hard to ignore, and I seriously doubt this movie will age too well because of them. Oh well, I suppose only time will tell. I'll make sure to check back with you guys on September 5th, 2047, once they finally unveiled the next adaptation of it. As for now... Well, that was surprisingly simple.